Hello, we've been looking at different types of homicide and the psychological aspects behind each category of homicide. The first one was justified homicide. Was it justified? Was it not? What does being able to kill somebody and get away with it legally mean? Is it right and wrong? Is it black or white? I don't know. The next one was impulsive crimes, crimes that are caused by jealousy or outbursts of rage, the spur of the moment crime of passion. Those can also be caused by mental illness or a drug-induced type of sociopathy that makes the crimes extremely horrific. However, today we're going to talk about premeditated murder, this psychopathic scheming, this willingness to take another person's life and plan it out, to ruminate on it, to go over it in your head before and after the event, and take measures in order to avoid capture. Does that make the crime a little more sinister, a little more horrific, a little more evil if you think about it, if it goes on in your head sometimes for years before the actual act of homicide? That'll be our question for today. So there's a tool that psychologists and psychiatrists use to try to define who is a sociopath or a psychopath and who doesn't fall into that category. And the main reasons for doing this is if there is a person of questionable character or motives or whatever they're doing, or if they're going on trial, they can administer this test, and the test is going to possibly help predict any type of danger of more violent behavior in the future. Now, it's not only given to the person that's in question, but it's also used alongside different corroborating evidence, criminal history, how they did in school, what their childhood was like, any type of input from family or from witnesses that may know them really well. So it's not just we give these people these questions and they answer them and we go by what they say. There's a lot more into it that makes it a lot more credible than most people think in the very beginning. So it's a diagnostic tool used to rate a person's psychopathic or antisocial tendencies, which we all have some, maybe even a lot of these, but we're all not falling directly into this category. People who are psychopathic prey ruthlessly on others using charm, deceit, violence, or other methods that allow them to get what they want. Now, Hare Psychopathy checklist is broken up into two different parts. The first part is your personality type of factors, your type 1 factors. These are the things that are going to last throughout a lifetime. These are the harder things to change. Type 2 is concerning behavioral issues. Some of these you can outgrow and you can change from. Like if you have a problem with drugs or alcohol, you can go to Alcoholics Anonymous and stop drinking, and then that will change your personality and who you are after that. We're going to look at the type 1 factors. Now the first of these is a superficial charm. The psychopath is a very likable person. They can talk anybody into anything that they want them to do because everybody gets along with them. This is the Ted Bundys of the world that everybody loves. Women will write him letters knowing already that he's a serial killer. The second part is the grandiose self-image. They are a god in their own mind. They think that they are better than everybody else, and whatever they want is paramount to what anybody else's needs are. Then we talked about the pathological lying. Psychopaths are by nature lying all of the time. It's an inherent part of their nature. but it's not just lying. They have a goal to it, this cunning, manipulative, con man type of persona where they will lie to get what they want. It's a means to an end. And they don't have any remorse or guilt for what they did. They're completely justified in whatever their actions were. They have shallow affect. They have a callous lack of empathy. And they don't ever take responsibility for what they're doing. Even if they are about to be executed for it, they will claim innocence until it is over. Now, the first case I want us to look at is Ira Einhorn. This is the unicorn killer. He's given that name because Einhorn in the German language, this means one horn. There's nothing really magical or unique about it, as somebody came up with the name because of that. Anyway, he's our hippie guru 1960s Earth Day speaker. He's an orator. He likes to be in front of crowds, talking to everybody. He had a dancer girlfriend who was a really good student, and he ended up strangling her. And he liked to write poetry about the times that he would abuse her and how it made him feel really, really good, and how the words rolled off of his tongue and sounded like poetry. When she finally left, it was the last straw when he started to put cats into the shower because he loved the sound of them screaming when the water was hitting them. So he goes on and gets another girlfriend, and the same kind of thing happens. He assaults her, this time with a broken Coke bottle, and then afterward strangles her. But neither one of these girls ended up pressing charges. They didn't want the law to get involved. They just wanted out of the relationship. So they didn't call the police. They didn't have a restraining order. Nothing like that happened. In 1974, Ira Einhorn meets Holly Maddux. Now, she is a beautiful woman. She's a cheerleader. She is salutatorian of the school. She's a great, excellent student, extremely bright. And during their relationship, it becomes really turbulent. It lasts for 3 years, but it becomes really like up and down, violent kind of relationship until he becomes really possessive, abusive, and violent towards her, to the point that he would leave bruises on her, and her friends would begin to ask, and that's what finally made her leave the relationship. She gets out. She goes to New York City, and she meets another man and begins a relationship with this other gentleman. Well, Ira finds out, and being the possessive, egotistical person he is, well, nobody else can have you. So he demands that she comes back and gets the stuff out of the house. If you're going to be that way, then you need to get your stuff and be on your way. So when she comes to get all of her belongings, he murders her, and he stuffs her into a steamer's chest, a big like luggage trunk that you would put into the cargo of a ship. And he stuffs that into the closet, and he just leaves her there for 2 whole years. The neighbors eventually started to smell the stench of the decomposing body and called the police and complained, and that's how he finally gets caught. Is the police come in, they search the house, they open the closet door, and they find the mummified remains of Holly Maddux. Ira Einhorn's story is nowhere close to over, and it's what happened after he's arrested that really cements his place in this psychopathic scheming category. He has bail set, and remember, he's an orator. He's our Earth Day speaker guru. He talked at the first Earth Day and claims that he was one of the original organizers of the holiday and of all of the rallies that they give. But that means he has a lot of supporters, a lot of fans, and somebody paid his bail. and he immediately just disappears. He goes to Europe, he runs to Ireland, he changes his name, and as soon as the heat is on, he tries to avoid capture again. He runs to England, and then he runs to Sweden, changing his name every time he's in a new place, going through this elaborate ball of lies in order to keep this going. And while he's in Sweden, he meets another woman and marries her. Remember, these people are charming. They have this over-the-top type of charm that people like them. That's how this crazy bearded guy could get a cheerleader that's salutatorian. They have some sort of charisma about them that makes them attractive to other people. So he convinces this woman to marry him. He goes to France and comes back to Sweden. She finally becomes disenchanted with the whole thing, and one day she's reading a true crime biography and figures out that this is the guy that she's married to, that she's living with, that has been on the run for 20 years, and she turns him in. Our next schemer, which these are really complicated, and they're going to get more so as we go, so I'm not going to be able to do as many as I have before, but we're going to get a little more into detail. I wish I could go into great lengths of detail, but that would just take forever. We don't have time for that. So we're going to talk about John List. He is an only child. He's the baby of an extreme, fanatic religious family. They are Lutheran, and they are all about it. John's not allowed to have friends. The idea of playing, of having fun, is when John and Mom are going to sit together and read scripture from the holy book. Now, when he got older, he joined the military. He did a brief stint in World War II. He didn't see any real combat or any action, but he did bring back an Austrian war pistol. It's a trophy that he had from another soldier that they had found, and that's going to come into play later. He's a very detail-oriented, like over-the-top compulsive type of personality, not just like a military person having their shirts ironed a certain way all of the time, having things in certain places. He's more into the obsessive compulsive disorder type of category. And this makes it so that he has no people skills whatsoever. So he's going to end up losing a lot of jobs because of this, because he doesn't have the personality to stay in the job, to keep people around him, to show that he's valuable. He's just really awkward socially. He doesn't understand the social cues. So because of being fired a lot, losing jobs, he becomes in debt. But while he's in debt, he decides to go way overboard with it, and he moves his entire family into this big 18-room New Jersey Victorian mansion. This is not going to help his financial situation whatsoever. And when I say he moved the family in, the family is his mom, his elderly mom, his wife Helen, and then their 3 children. He has 2 girls and a boy. Now, Helen has a deteriorating cognitive ability from contracting syphilis from her first marriage. So she's in a dementia type of state from the syphilis taking over. And that's causing stress along with taking care of your elderly mother, and then you're in this debt in this huge house that you can't take care of. So he's also not happy with his children at all. His daughter ends up walking down the street late at night, and he has to go pick her up at the police station, and she's a slut and a whore because he had to do that. So one day, in his misery and his discontent, he walks up to his mom, and he gives her a kiss, and he takes out the Austrian pistol, the trophy that he had, and he shoots her in the back of the head. And later that day, his wife is sitting at the table, and he does the exact same thing to her. Walks up to her, kisses her, and shoots her in the back of the head. Then he waits. His two daughters come home from school. As soon as they get home, he shoots them too. But his son was playing soccer. He had a soccer game that night, so he drove down to where the game was going on. He sat there as a spectator and he watched the game until it finished, then got his son in the car, drove him home. He shot him, but for some reason, John Jr. Didn't die right away, so he shot him 9 more times afterward. So then he gathers all of the bodies except for Grandma, who's upstairs and too heavy to lug down, and he puts the entire family into sleeping bags and lines them up in his house, and then he prays over their body. And then he proceeds to write a letter to the pastor of his church explaining why he did what he did and the rationale behind it. And he felt sincerely that he had to kill them before they renounced their faith to ensure their place in heaven. He figured if he did this now, that it would be a sure thing for them to go to heaven. If he waited, then they might not make it. So he went on the run. Nobody knew this was going on. The bodies were not found for a month afterward, so he had plenty of time to get to where he was going before they even started looking for him. John List is on the run now. He changes his name to Robert Clark. He runs first to Denver and then eventually ends up in Virginia. Now the authorities, they want to catch him really bad. It's been 18 years. This is a cold case, and what he did was so horrific, it's national news. He killed his entire family, his mom, his wife, his kids, and is just gone. So they approach a show that has been quite successful in catching some of these perpetrators, and they wanted their help. It was America's Most Wanted, and he was profiled on there, and the show aired across America. And they had a relationship with a man named Frank Bender, who was a forensic artist. And what he did was he's able to make a bust, an age-advanced bust of his head. It's a clay sculpture of his face and his shoulders, and he's able to make it look like he would 18 years after the crime was committed. Well, this leads to a tip and an arrest, and he's finally sentenced at trial to 5 life sentences, 1 for each murder. Now later, he gives an interview to investigative reporter Connie Chung in 2002. Now, during Connie Chung's in-depth interview with John List, she asked him, why didn't you just kill yourself when you found yourself in insurmountable debt that was out of control? Why didn't you just take your own life instead of murdering your entire family? And List very patiently explained how suicide is a sin, and that sin would bar him from heaven eternally. But if I murdered them and I asked for forgiveness, we can still spend eternity as a family, because either they've forgiven me or they don't even know that I'm the one that did it in the first place. And later on in the interview, he added, pretty coldly, that after he shot his wife at the table and was waiting for his daughters, he cleaned up the blood and made a sandwich because he was hungry. Now, with John List, it's not just a perversion of Holy Scripture in ways that nobody could ever fathom that put him in the depths of psychopathy. Well, it's that combined with the great lengths that he went to escape justice, to not take responsibility for what he was doing, the cold methodical way that he went about committing the crime. But what's really, really deep into psychopathy with Mr. List is the belief in the delusional rationale that he has for everything he's doing. At one point, he actually told a radio host during a broadcast that he needed and was rightfully owed a second trial because he had gotten PTSD from the murder of his family. So now we're going to dive into psychopathy proper. This is the story of Sante Kimes. She had a lifetime of kleptomania, lies, deception, fraud, conning, escape, murder, you name it, she did it, and she did it really well. Oh, what a tangled web we weave. Sante has a very complicated and intriguing life. If there's a character so far that you would want to study because of the compelling story that is behind it, a movie could be made about this very, very easily, and it has been. So Sante is born in 1934 in Oklahoma to an Irish mom and a dad from India. Now, 1934 in Oklahoma is a really dark and troubling time. This is the midst of the Depression and the Dust Bowl, and it's straight out of Steinbeck's Grapes of Wrath. So they do what everybody else in there is doing. They move to California. Well, when they get there, the dad takes off. He just abandons them. They can't find work. Mom has to turn to prostitution. She abandons the children as well. All of them go into orphanages or into foster homes. Sante eventually ends up living on the street. And at 9 years old is the first time that she gets caught stealing. And she's arrested for this, and it's the first thing on her criminal record. And she's most likely sexually abused. There's a chance that as a young girl she was turning to prostitution to try to feed herself in the circumstances that she was in. A more wealthy type of upper class family finds her and they adopt her. They want to give her a chance. They put her into school and she starts getting into clubs and cheerleading, going to the prom, just being a normal high school student. But she has a few friends where she starts to tell the truth to, starts to tell her story to, and she begins stealing her stepfather's credit cards to commit fraud with and to steal with. She's stealing from him and stealing from department stores and other people. And then as soon as she gets out of high school, she gets married twice. She finds herself pregnant with a son and begins the next phase in her criminal career. Now, Sante's marriages are not going to last very long. However, she's an extremely attractive young woman. And part of the problem is that she knows this. And she's going to become the consummate con artist. She's going to be running a scam wherever she goes to try to rip anybody off of anything that is going to help her get what she wants and where she wants to go. She walked into a dealership one day, a car dealership, and just said she wanted to test drive a Cadillac and gave a fake ID to the car salesman and just took off with it. And later on, the police caught up with her, and she swore to them that she was still trying it out. She was believing her lies, and she was getting wrapped up in the web that she was weaving. And in Los Angeles, she started to work as a prostitute. It's a very lucrative career with a lot of money down there. And this is when she meets millionaire Kenneth Kimes. How they met is a little speculative. We don't know. But they had a son. His name is Kenneth Jr. What we do know is that Kenneth Kimes is an extremely wealthy man. He has houses in Los Angeles. He has houses on the East Coast, in Florida. He has a house in the Bahamas. He has a Hawaii house. He's got property all over the place, and he has investments. They are wealthy. They're not hurting. They don't ever have to worry about money. But even in that situation, Sante needs to steal. She has a deep-rooted instinctual desire to steal, and it's what causes her dopamine to go crazy, makes her feel good. So she'll carry a huge purse or a bag into stores and throw a roast in there, or throw a pair of shoes in there, or makeup, or just whatever. Anywhere she's going, she's having to steal. And while she's doing this, her son is growing up, and she's teaching him the tools of the trade. Young Kenneth Jr. is becoming the apprentice. Now, to list all of Sante's crimes and aliases and everything that she was up to in this con artist routine of hers, the glamorous socialite with the apprentice son, it would take a long time and would take many, many volumes. But one thing noteworthy that she did before her husband died of natural causes was she liked to hire maids from Mexico. They were illegal immigrants that she could take advantage of easily, that wouldn't call the police or didn't have any family or anything. They were easy targets. And she would enslave them. She would burn one with a hot iron, lock another in a closet. She would repeatedly whip some of them. She is one of very few people that have been arrested in the United States for violating slavery laws. So after she served time in prison for this, she served 3 years. Her husband had passed away, and she conspired with a lawyer to burn down one of his houses for the insurance money. Now, she's trying to claim his inheritance, and he had cut her out of the will, and his previous wives were supposed to get the inheritance, so she's trying to make a living out of whatever she can, because she can't even prove if she was married or not. She'd produced several different documents that were forged, that were different dates, that we don't know. So she resorts to burning down this house, trying to get the insurance money, and the lawyer is contacted by the authorities, and they're after Sante. So he becomes an informant. So Kenneth Jr. and Sante invite him down to Central America on vacation, and Sante and Kenneth come back, but the lawyer never does. Then there was the banker in the Bahamas who was in charge of a lot of Kenneth Kimes' estate, and he was last seen in the Bahama house with Sante, but he ended up dead. Then there was the real estate friend that they killed and ended up throwing into a dumpster. So after living a lifetime of the con lady that movies are made about, and raising the apprentice son to be the counterpart in criminal activity, they decide they're going to pull off the ultimate con and make it so that they don't need to worry about making money or anything anymore. And they learn about Ira Silverman, and they begin to plan to kill her. They're going to take her estate and all of her worldly possessions. It's going to belong to them, and they're just going to get rid of this lady. She is in the way. So they move to New York, and they rent a suite of rooms in her mansion. And they start to do favors for her, cleaning up, doing little odd jobs, doing whatever she needs to in order to get into her good graces. And while they're doing that, they gain access to paperwork, to account numbers, to signatures, and they start to forge documentation so that they can take over the estate when her untimely demise happens. Which it does happen. and they stuff her into a trunk. They dispose of the body somewhere. Nobody knows where the body of Ira Silverman is. It has never been found to this day. But Sante made a mistake, and she was talking to a friend on the phone, and when she let out a little too much information. His friend went to the police, and they began to search the mansion. They searched her rooms. They eventually searched her car, which was a Lincoln. This Lincoln she acquired by ripping off a dealership, using her dead husband's credit to have it delivered. Never paid for it, wrote a check that wasn't any good for it. But inside this Lincoln they found a sheet of paper where Sante had practiced writing the signature of Ira Silverman over and over and over and over again, and tried to get her handwriting right. They also had a witness that was the public notary. He said he thought that all of the papers were being forged because she was impersonating Ira Silverman, that she was in disguise. None of the papers were signed in front of him. It was a really unorthodox way of trying to transfer titles and transfer accounts and transfer the last will and testament. All of that stuff just didn't seem like it was legit to the notary. Well, with his testimony and with all of the evidence they found in the Lincoln, both Sante and Kenneth were sentenced to 100 years in prison apiece. The only reason why they avoided the death penalty is because Kenneth Jr. confessed. He's not the sociopath that his mom is. And Sante, however, still denies that she did it until this day, but she was also spared the death penalty because of Kenneth's confession. So let me know what you guys think. Does the act of fantasizing or plotting or planning the crime that you're going to commit make it worse than if you just do it spur of the moment on impulse? Does the actual willingness to take somebody's life and knowing beforehand, the malice of forethought, does that make it more evil? Well, we have our three examples. We have our guru, hippie, Earth Day orator. We have our religious fanatic, obsessive compulsive personality. And we have Sante Kimes, the consummate con artist lady, the thing that movies are made out of. Well, thanks for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. Let me know what you think, and I will see you next time where we talk about mass murder and spree killing.